think people hit it pretty low. This is happening, just don't want to drive.
Safety plastic, sneak it on the back side. Somebody come on 77 across those 2 lanes.
Oh, boy.
No, we're wrong.
Invited VIP.
What's that?
I was like, we get in an hour early.
Oh, yeah. That's the home product, sure.
But not the,
General public.
not the one we saw, the animal hospital. Remember the.
You've done it for years, is that what you said?
Across from National Humane Society, he did. horses
No
and
moan.
Things like that. That was
I'm
where he
cat
originally
down
got
customers all the time.
When we first moved here, our golden retriever got sick,
Yeah.
and we didn't know a soul was up with him. Other than, hey, there's a vet right across down the street from the vet. I took him there, and he just was nervous because I gave him some KO Pectate, and said he'd be fine. 2 days later, the emergency ran, full-blown carbo.
Oh,
I usually get.
Saved him.
I usually get.
$2,500 later,
yeah.
Not coming.
and then 3 years later, he got lymphoma and had cancer.
I had a few that had heart, one of them saved him, got home, got out.
Dude.
Oh,
Even fun.
Did you have the radio on, sir? Looks like somebody put the deer
He's the main
up by Epperson's.
Yeah, they're working that.
Is that what that is?
The second time we've had a deer hit
Really?
in that area. It's, that's all over the years.
Yeah, you would think, huh?
I think just all the ones that we had was worse.
Oh, no? You didn't?
Somebody called me, you did, did it.
Oh, well.
Okay. Where's your insurance?
We were going to Homestead Heritage one morning, my wife and I, laying alongside the road, like 20 yards off the lane.
I thought you said casino. Yeah, I told him.
I heard y'all had a course.
I saw him on
No, I
Saturday.
put a phone on my middle of the road, put several head of cattle.
Rings together and everything. No, you came there, threw it in his face immediately as soon as I saw him. I was like, yeah, I guess I'm on yesterday. Yeah, yeah, I did.
No, got hit on one of the main
He was like,
thoroughfares.
ooh, but I'm like, it's like, laughing.
Bert was like, sweet, you're saying I didn't miss it.
Yeah, you're like, good, all right.
Broke his back.
Actually, it doesn't know.
Not right here.
No.
You had a meeting?
It's right by the sauna. I'm like, okay, yeah, that door's going down.
Y'all ready, guys? Good? All right, 6 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Rogers, Collins, Eckerling,
Here.
Stigner,
Here.
McLean,
Here.
Baker,
Here.
Westergaard.
Here.
This conference will now be recorded.
All right, item 4 is presentation and discussion regarding the Reptilis rate study results and recommendations. Craig, you want to start that off?
Sure. So we have with us remotely tonight Justin Razor from Reptilis. They have completed all of their rate study and have some recommendations and things. So they want to present that to the council as to what their findings are. They have some recommendations at this point, it is just recommendations. They want your input before they finalize everything. And, we've had several meetings with the mayor, and I did a conference with him last week, so they introduced some of this stuff to him. And they were gonna tweak some more, so I'm gonna turn it over to Justin and let him handle it.
All right, thank you, Craig. Mayor, council, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Good.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen and make sure you can see that as well. While I'm doing that, my name is Justin Razor. I've been doing rate consulting for over 10 years, 2 of which I've actually worked at a utility. I was head rates and charges at Austin Water. So I understand being on your side of the table as well. You should be able to see my screen now. Everyone see okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. So a couple things I'll be covering in the agenda is basically our rate study process, what we did to get to the results, our financial plan assumptions, and then I'll cover at a high level the utility financial plan, how we look in terms of are we meeting our expenses, and next is the cost of service results. Now, the cost of service is a guideline by the American Water Works Association. It's not a must, so just keep that in mind as I show some of these results. Then I'll go over rate and typical bill comparisons. So the City of Robinson's rate and fees is really a balancing act when we try to fund operations, fund capital projects. We also have coverage requirements, and we got to fund growth. There's a lot of growth coming to the area, and we also want to ensure customer rate equity. How do we do that? We do that through financial plan that we put together, and the city will actually have this tool once I am done with the study. So if some assumptions change, you're able to update that and see how it affects your customers. And then another thing, how we get there is rate design. And we're going to discuss a lot of rate design options this evening that relate to the American Water Works Association recommendations. So as I mentioned, there's some standard guidelines for what we could use. It's these manuals here. The M1 and then the Water Environmental Federation has the wastewater systems. And then we also write the book as well. We have a book out there, Raptellus does. So following that, we look at the financial planning process that it takes to get where we are. So we look at a lot of data. We're looking at account growth, usage per account. So we go in the billing data and look at how much your customers are using on the water side, wastewater side. Look at operating expenses and capital planning. Putting that all together, we look at the growth aspect too, is capital project funding. How are we going to fund that? Are we going to fund it with cash and debt? And what can our rates afford? So we ran a lot of different scenarios and worked with Craig on this to really nail down a good approach. And we also have to meet our targets. So reserve targets right now are 90 days, and what we're going to recommend later is 180, just because as you go out for loans, rating agencies like to see a little more cash in the bank and maintain that. So that produces a cash flow, and then that ultimately is the revenue requirement. How do we split up the pie? Basically the expenses. And so the assumptions we used for our financial plan, we had a lot of inflationary items coming up. The fuel, chemicals, which are critical to operations, and expenses increased significantly in 2022, and we see those going further in the next year. We also have wholesale water and wastewater price increases. Now, this is cost you just have to pass on to your customer. It's the City of Waco's contract with wastewater, water. That's where we send our wastewater and we buy our water. So those are going up as well. We also had AMI that recently had a project that was capital intensive, as well as additional staff that are going to need to come on to fund growth. Some of our major capital improvements we're looking at are the reservoir, water treatment plant upgrades, and line replacements. some other assumptions. We actually changed this to 180 days, and we are still able to meet that target. But we're also looking at debt issuances. A debt issuance in 2023 of $10 million, $5 million for water, $5 million for wastewater, and then $10 million for water in 2025. These are rough numbers as the engineers are still kind of working and trying to figure out what would be best for the city at this point. So what we did is we used these as to see what our rates can handle, and so what we did is put together an overall financial plan. So right now, if you do not have any rate increases, your operating revenues and expenditures, your revenues do not meet your expenditures. If you look at that top graph, you see that your expenses are going over your revenues and throughout. And then the bottom graphs where your fund balance goes if you do not increase rates. And so what we did is we really tried to smooth this out as much as possible. If you see how the revenue is just meeting expenses in the top graph, and then also we're just meeting the fund balance target to make sure that we're not putting so much pressure on our customers, and we're really also funding our expenses in the best way possible. So here's what water looks like with no increases in 5 years. And this is separated out. What you saw before was combined. And now we have wastewater. As you can see, significantly, wastewater is significantly not paying for its expenses and underperforming. And we'll see that in the recommended rate increases. So that being said, that's the financial plan as a whole. And as I talked about, there's this revenue requirement. And we look at different customer characteristics to come up with the cost of service. So now you have your total dollar amount. And now how do we split up that total dollar amount? Well, we look at how everyone is paying their proportionate share. And so we take that revenue requirement, we ID certain costs, storage, pumping, meters, and we're able to allocate that to residential and commercial based on AWVA standards and WEF standards. So what was the result of that? What we see in your water is that residential is subsidizing commercial, and currently a rate increase, if we didn't do anything besides look at cost of service, would be a 46.2% increase on commercial. There's not a whole lot of commercial customers, so that's just showing you that that's just how much it would cost. It's $146,000 cost of service difference. It's actually even more. We see that residential, again, is subsidizing commercial. So I'll get in a little more of our recommendations. Right now, I want to talk about the current state, where we're at with your rates. So right now, your fixed charges are one flat charge for residential, and in commercial, it goes up, almost a couple dollars. And I'll actually fast forward to it real quick. Just the commercial rates here, $4 more for a 1 inch, $7 more than your 3/4 for that. So why? One of the things AWVA recommends is what's called a capacity equivalency charge. So if you charge your 3/4 inch $40, your 1 inch should be 2.5 times that. And this is done through a study that if you are having a 1 inch line, the utility needs to make capacity for you in the system, therefore then it costs more. They instantaneously have to meet that demand. And for a 3/4 inch, it's not that much. For 8, it's significant. And so there's science behind how many gallons per minute that actually come through and how much you need. So this is not a recommendation at this point, but just if you were to go to meter equivalents right away, this is how your rates would increase. So when we look at this 1.5 at $57, you can see it should be $161. So you can see now why commercial is not meeting their cost of service because they have the larger meters and they're not paying those larger fixed charges. The next is the variable, so the charge per 1,000 gallons. Right now, we don't really have a pricing signal, and there's only really 2 tiers. It's 0 to 10 and over 10. So that's water, and we'll make some recommendations to send pricing signals for conservation for these high users. Next is wastewater. Right now, you use winter averaging with a maximum fixed charge cap. One of the things we don't recommend if you're using winter averages is to remove that cap. Because it is a winter average and you're charging it all year long. And it should be accurate to indoor use, because you don't water your lawn. Well, some of us don't water our lawn in the summer.
Mhm.
Any questions on those?
What is winter averaging for wastewater?
Great question. So winter averaging is basically, there's not really wastewater meters. There are some for larger commercial customers, but they're not accurate, not as accurate as you'd think. So what the utility does is say, we know that you're watering your yard during the summer. Where we can get a really accurate read is in the winter, where you're not really watering your yard. So what the utility does is take an average of your water use from November to February, takes that total, divides it by 3, gets an average, and then charges you that amount all year round. That way, it can, as accurately as possible, assess your wastewater that's actually going down the drain that the city actually treats. So when you water your yard, it actually doesn't go down the drain, it goes on your yard. So the city doesn't want to charge you for every single drop of water, it just wants to do a winter average, it wants to do indoor use. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yep. So right now on the screen is your current water rate. Fixed charge for all residential is $46.25. For the first 10,000 gallons, $4.93, and then over 10 is $5.18. And between that $4.93 and $5.18, there's not really a big pricing signal. 25 cents is really not going to send, hey, I should be more conservative, my bill is going to go up. So that's one recommendation we'll make later. And then residential wastewater rates, as I talked about, there's a max bill of $44.73, which caps out a lot of your customers, and I'll show you based on the billing data here. And then your commercial rates are, as shown on the screen. I talked about the fixed charges are not really meeting capacity equivalencies that we recommend, and then same with the pricing signal in the second tier. This is commercial wastewater rates, similar to water. So what we did is we looked at all your customers at 3 years of data, and this is the most recent year, 21, that we looked at. What this is basically, on the left, it's the number of bills that fall in the block, and at the bottom is basically how many blocks there is. So at 4,000 gallons, you go up and we see about 50% of your customers use 4,000 gallons, 0 to 4, so they stop at that block. 60% use 0 to 5, and then when you get to 0 to 6, 70% of your bills fall within that range. So we designed prices to send pricing signals to more of these customers up here. They're using over 10, and then beyond, where we get, the top 10% that are really using a lot of water. So I first mentioned the financial plan. What kind of rate increases are we looking at? Without looking at any rate design, what we came up with is a 0% increase on your water fixed charge, and then a water volume charge increase of 3.5 just to keep up with inflation, and then a fixed increase of 10% on water and an increase of 10% on the flow in 2024. And that's a fiscal year, so that recommendation would hit October 2023. But as you see, the bottom graphs, you see water, how it's moving along and supporting the system. And then wastewater is actually running at a deficit. And right now we have the fund balance to really smooth into a positive balance by year 2027 with these 3-year recommendations. So right now we have a current versus proposed in what we recommend. Can y'all see my screen?
Yeah, we have a little bit of lag here when you change it.
Okay,
It's a couple minutes before we change.
I'm waiting for it to change.
Yeah, it's changed. We've got the current versus proposed.
Perfect. So what we recommend for residential is actually dropping that fixed charge by $6.36 and maintaining that over the next couple of years. That's gonna help your low users that don't use a lot of water and have to pay that no matter how much they use. The other alternative is we recommend actually implementing 4 tiers. Those tiers based on your usage that we just saw, 0 to 3, 3 to 10, and 10 to 20, and 20 and over. And the pricing is right above those in the alternative column. And that's sending a pricing signal to those high users. So over 20,000 gallons, you're gonna be charged $13.06. And we did look at neighboring city Waco, and we're close to them on outside city customer rates and matching some of those tiers as well. So these aren't unreasonable. So how does this affect your customers? Is really what, so the first column is your usage in thousands of gallons, so 2, 5, 10, and 12,000. Everyone really 10 and under is gonna see a savings per month, even though we're increasing rates 3.5% on the volume side. It's because we're decreasing that fixed charge, $6, because if you remember, commercial was subsidizing residential. We're trying to fix that slowly over time, not do it right away, because that's a big jump. And so this is a typical monthly bill based on the usage you see in the left hand. Next, we have a commercial water. Sorry, was there a question?
No question.
Okay. Next, we have the commercial water as its current state and what we recommend. And this alternative is moving in the right direction. It's not going there overnight. But we recommend that everyone is charged in terms of the 3/4 the same. There's not a difference in terms of being able to support a 3/4 inch for commercial versus a residential. So we recommend that we continue with the 40-36, but then any larger meters are using a multiple and step into that multiple over 3 years. And then we added a 6-inch and an 8-inch, as that might be a possibility in the future. The next is to actually, we lowered the first tier and increase the second tier to have a more significant pricing signal when you go over that.
And these are base rates, correct?
I'm sorry?
Are these base rates for commercial?
Yeah, so the base rate is the first few. Screen jumping on me. Wait until it goes back. So the first ones you saw, there we go. So the first ones you see there with the inches and the meter size is the base rates we're recommending for commercial. The tier 1 and tier 2 is what we're recommending for the volume. So how does this affect an average customer, commercial customer at 3/4 inch? Well, we saw that, you know, the 3/4 inch customer is actually going to get a decrease, and where you're going to see the impact is those larger users that have large amounts of water, and you have to instantaneously meet your demand. On the wastewater, one of our recommendations is, as you see on the screen, is to have no cap, no max bill. And because you saw how wastewater was such a deficit, we recommend keeping the current fixed charge and increasing the 1,000-gallon charge right below that to $2.42, no max. There will be a decrease, and when you combine the bills, though, there actually is an overall decrease on residential. You're increasing wastewater and decreasing water, just to balance out the funds. Commercial is similar. We're recommending actually keeping it the higher fixed charge and stepping into AWVA blocks as well, and then going from $1.85 per thousand to $1.89.
So we're still on the wastewater, the residential wastewater current versus proposed on the screen.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, it's still there?
yeah,
Sorry.
so I think on one of your slides, you were showing 50% of the residential meters were using 4,000 gallons or so.
Yeah,
So in this case, a 5,000 gallon user, their bill, well, now it's switched, but their bill goes up
Sorry.
approximately $8
correct.
overall.
I believe so. Yeah, I can double check that once there's not a big lag. I don't want to take care of it, but I believe it, a 5,000 gallon customer, which is 50% of your customers,
Their overall bill's going up $8-ish.
has a $3 and 32, has an $8.72 increase on wastewater, and a $11 decrease, a $7 decrease. So basically, they see a savings of $5.
And we're bouncing around, like we don't see that chart.
Okay.
That's water, right? What's the combined?
Combined, it's about $1 increase.
Did we see that slide?
$1, $2.
I don't think so.
Okay. I thought we saw a slide that was combined.
Well, in the challenge
Right.
we have, with wastewater, and we've talked about this before, you know, where our rate was and where the cap was, we were only billing people up to, Karen's, about 3,800 gallons. Everything over 3,800 gallons had been for free. And we were charging 77 cents per 1,000 gallons. Waco now charges us, I think it's $1.39 per 1,000 gallons to treat the wastewater. And that's no cost to get the wastewater from the houses to Waco. So that's why he's showing how the deficit in wastewater was going to start ramping up so fast. And if we get a large commercial user, because our commercial rate's 88 cents, if that, the Project Ocho we're talking about, the number of water they're talking about, we figured out that at our current rates, we would lose $14,000 a month. Just on the wastewater they would be doing versus what we're paying Waco for the treatment of it. So our wastewater rates, I mean, it's nice that they were capped, but the only people that were really paying for what they were using were the people under 3,800 gallons. Everybody over 3,800 gallons wasn't paying for their wastewater. It was being subsidized in other ways.
So correct for me,
Right.
I guess the biggest change we're seeing here is on the commercial side, right?
And on the
And on the
wastewater
waste.
side.
On the waste side. So So my question is things, you know, we're working really hard to try to get new commercial businesses in the city of Robinson.
Right.
Will a structure like this scare those potential businesses away, or is this common? This is what they're saying when they're competing.
This is
out?
common. We are extremely abnormal when it comes to the base rates especially. Most cities, the commercial rates are not as prohibitive at the higher consumption as the residential because commercial uses more water. So, you saw there were only 2 tiers for commercial, that's why. Waco and those, they're structured the same way. Waco's base rates currently are higher than what's being proposed, but we're trying to gradually get there instead of getting there overnight. But one of the things you have to remember is when somebody has a 6-inch meter, we have to be able to provide the water they need when they need it. We don't have a way to control it. So if they open it up, we have to have that water ready to go. So we have to be able to provide that water whether they're using it or not. So that's why the base fees are, it's almost like a demand charge. They're paying extra so that water is available when they need it. Because if we only provide water based on our lowest level of usage, we may not have that water when we need it. So the way our rates were structured before, there was no real charge for those bigger meter sizes. So, I mean, it works currently because we have a pretty small number of those bigger meters out there, but we start getting some businesses sitting with real big meters. And again, just like the wastewater, we're gonna get upside down pretty fast. And we already, our residential is already subsidizing our commercial. We don't wanna increase that subsidy. Back to you, Justin.
Yeah, that's a good point. The wastewater charges that you're paying for, are not meeting the current, your current rates are not meeting what you're paying for your wastewater expense, not including the costs that to run the utilities. So that's why the need for the 10% increases. That actually is not the screen I'm showing right now, so I didn't know if Destiny was using some. Are you helping with the lag, Destiny?
I'm not, but I can.
Okay, because I'm showing a different screen. Let me try to. It must be GoToMeeting. Should be able to see peer utilities on the screen.
Yeah, we're seeing commercial wastewater current versus proposed bills.
Turn off my camera. Hold the lag, maybe. There we go. All right, so one of the things we put together is a comparison of your average customer. So your average customer on the water side is around 7,000 gallons of water, and that's a 3/4 inch meter. On the wastewater side, it's around 5,000 gallons. So overall, you see your comparison here. You see Robinson existing at 125.49. That's the current rate. And so in fiscal year 2023, that rate is only going up a couple dollars at 128.54 due to the offsetting water and wastewater benefits. So not really a large increase to your average customer overall in residential. And to leave time for questions, that's the end of the presentation, and if you'd like to discuss anything else, I'd be happy to.
So I'll just chime in here. So I think where we're at now is we want guidance from you. Do you want to look at the, do we want to look at 4-tiered residential like it's here with setting the rates to try to trigger more conservation at the higher volumes. I mean, we currently do have residential customers that, in certain neighborhoods that are using 60, 70, 80,000 gallons a month to water their lawns. And, at our current pricing, it obviously is not a negative for them to do that. So, but they do make up a pretty small percentage of our total customers. So, we're kind of looking for guidance here. Like Justin said, anything we're going to propose as far as here's what we'll bring forward in an ordinance will happen with the budget, happen in October. And we can look at the phasing. The wastewater, we're fairly limited, but I was just showing the mayor here that, and this has actually come up with a commercial too, because Waco does the same thing, I think, for commercial, but their base rate for wastewater is $22.52, so it is lower than ours, but their volumetric rate is $5.83 per thousand, whereas I think you're proposing $2.42 for our volumetric rate for wastewater. Justin? I think it was 242, 240
You're talking
something.
about, were you saying, commercial or residential?
Residential, weren't you? The base rate was 40.
2.3.
Yeah, and then the volumetric was like 242
Yep.
per thousand. Yeah, so Waco, while Waco has a lower base rate, their volumetric rate is over double what we're proposing here. So.
And also, you know, when you compare yourself to Waco, it's not apples to apples. They also have impact fees that they charge their customers, so that helps a little bit with some of the capital. Where we're just charging just strictly rates. So when you look at that comparison, not everyone's the same in terms of their actual costs, where they're getting their water, how they're getting their water, how much it costs to treat their water. So we just like to show a comparison, but it is really apples and oranges.
But you were asking about Waco's commercial rates inside the city. So like their meter size it's 110 for a 1.5 inch. It goes to 169 for a 2, 292 for a 3, 428 for a 4, 692 for a 6, 1046 for an 8-inch meter. Then they have a 15-inch meter, which is 1546 is the base rate. So it's the same theory. I don't think anybody does it based on the actual water amount, what he originally showed, because I think the largest one you were like at 9,000 or 10,000. No one does that, but almost everyone does, double or triple. Because when you're going from a 3/4 inch to a 1-inch meter, you're not going up a quarter. Your water volume is significantly larger. And when you go from a 1 inch to 2 inch, you're not doubling. You're like quadrupling the amount of water they can pull. So you try to find some mix in there that works with your revenue needs, but also allows them to pay for what they need available when they need it. So.
Right. And the other thing is, if you're really concerned about businesses coming in, Waco does charge versus you. They do charge an impact fee that's significantly higher for like a commercial customer. That's like 6 inches. You cut $100,000 capital right away. So overall, I can do a recap. We're looking at increases on the water volumetric of 3.5%. Nothing on the fixed charge. We're actually dropping that fixed charge $6, and recommend putting in 4 tiers and pricing to high users. The other thing is we're recommending no cap on the wastewater and using the winter average, and then keeping the structure the same for the commercial customers, but having to get to the cost that, the cost of service slowly over the next 3 years, and not one swoop increase 40-50%.
implementation on this, you're saying as far as this coming October?
Yeah, we would start the process this, it would go into effect in October, so we would probably run any, ordinance with the budget. Just do it all simultaneously. And of course, we can start education outside of that ahead of time, so, and, you know, and I think the chart, I don't think we got to see the chart on the wastewater, the one, you showed the one on the water where it shows what percentage of customers are at each volume level. I think
Yes.
with the lag, we didn't see the one for wastewater, but it's very similar. So for a lot of our customers, I think their, you know, their net change is gonna be very minimal. It's the high users who are gonna see the impact, the highest users.
Right.
For wastewater, I think more people are gonna see the impact just because right now, like I said, once they hit that 3,800 gallons or so, they're not paying for anything additional, so, those people will see an impact just because they're using more. And y'all had a chart like that that was based on, the winter average, right, for the wastewater, for the residential?
I
thought
don't believe we put one in this presentation.
No, you didn't have one in here. I think that may be one that,
We can,
I know I reached out, he has a analyst who works with him, and she'd sent me some stuff, and like 85% of our wastewater customers are using 5,000 gallons or less. So, you know, it's just those high-end users that are using more in the wintertime that are gonna see the impact.
And that difference is because of somewhere on septic systems not having wastewater?
I think it's just taking what their consumption, their water consumption is during, we do December, January, February, right, for winter average. So just taking the consumption for residential customers those times, they're seeing that. But even at 5,000, we're only charging for 3,800 gallons. And we're only charging about a fourth of what we need to be charging, so.
But if a customer has a septic system, they're still getting charged.
No, if you have septic, you don't pay sewer. You pay water if you have water, but you don't, and you pay trash, but you don't pay sewer if you have septic system. Which for most people on a septic system, having sewer would be cheaper. Septic's really good until something goes wrong, and then you pay about 4 years worth of
Yeah.
or in some people's
Firsthand.
case, 15 or 18 years worth of sewer bills at one time. So yeah, it's but yeah, we don't, I mean, if they're not on the sewer system, we can't charge them, so. But that really isn't, I mean, it's affecting the standpoint of, we have about 5,000 water accounts, we have 3,500, 3,700 sewer accounts. So we don't have as many people spreading the bill across as we do with water.
exactly.
But
And Craig, the 98% of your customers have a winter average of 10,000 or less.
okay,
So really, when you're looking at the wastewater bill, usage of $10, most of them are gonna see a $20 increase. And then on the water side, they'll see about a $2 to $4 increase. Not a whole lot for, what you need in capital. So it's really, stepping into it slowly, is the best process here.
But as Robinson continues to grow, as far as commercial, would that help the residential customers?
Down the road.
I think it can help with the capital costs. I think the thing, and I'm gonna go there since this is rate related. I'm going there, Justin. The thing
All right.
that I think we really need to consider, especially when we are talking about large commercial, is impact fees. Because we have to build additional capacity in the system in the future for future users. And we either do that by all the existing customers foot that entire bill, or we let the future customers start picking up part of that future bill. It's just, you can't charge them 100%. You have to do a study, you figure out what the cost is on different parts of the system. It only can be for new capacity, and then you can only charge them a maximum of 50%, which you don't even have to charge them that. But at least if you charge them something, you're getting money that's going into a fund that can only go for those capital improvements. That's debt you don't have to borrow and charge to your entire customer base. So,
Are we wanting to include that?
well, we're not gonna be able to have something like that up and running, but I think it's something we need to at least
Need
start
to
having a
know.
conversation about.
Mm-hmm.
I know some people don't like that.
Well, the only thing that I don't like about it is if you tell me that we're gonna have an impact fee, I understand it, but then that's going to drive the cost down. So then in effect, the impact fee is then reducing the population's bill. So they're footing some of that. So there has to be some kind of study in there into, is it 50% of what that max is, or it might have to be
Well, yeah,
a per.
you have to do an engineering study to decide based on projections, and I think it's every 10 years. You know, Justin, is it every 10 years for?
You take a 10-year master plan and you
Yeah.
calculate what those capital expenses are and needed capacity, and then you do an update every 5 years.
Yeah.
You're required to by the state of Texas to. And then once you do the study, you present, hey, here's 50% of that. You don't have to do that entire amount. You can
My last
really
city, we
count
did them.
And you do want to be competitive with Waco on this one, so that is something to keep in mind, because you will want to be competitive in their, for instance, their residential 3/4 inch is only $1,000 on the water side. So that is something you really consider as your neighbors when you do a impact fee, and you're trying to drive business and growth.
And the study's pretty in-depth. There's a cost associated with doing it. You do a study, you determine what is you have a basic unit measurement, you figure what one of these units, what is that cost effect on the system, and then you tie it to meter sizes and things. So like one residential meter is one, whereas a 6-inch commercial meter may be more, and you charge that unit, that charge for that. And then, like you said, you can't, by law, you can't charge more than 50%, but you can charge less. But it's just a way to help offset some of that future debt, because we've had some conversation about it, but water is becoming a very big issue here. And for my first, I guess I'm coming up on 7 years here. So my first 6 years and 2 months, the county's been, Waco's gonna have water for everybody. We're all just gonna hook up to Waco and buy water. And then, was that July? Waco got up and said, don't be looking at us. We don't have enough water for ourselves, let alone everybody else. And so now we're all scrambling to figure out where's our water gonna come from in the future. We're in a pretty good position because we have a plant, we have a river. There may be some options there. We're exploring those, but they're not gonna come cheap. So, that's just one of those things that if we want to think about for, especially the commercial, because I can tell you from the standpoint of commercial, once commercial folks pick a side, they don't bat an eye. My last city, we had a Super Walmart come in, and their water and sewer impacts together in 2004 were like $88,000, and they didn't bat an eye to write a check for those.
So would they ask for those in an incentive package to be waived?
You typically can't waive impact fees as part of an incentive package.
Well, and I guess kind of along the lines of what Bert's saying, because I'm not as familiar with that. We've worked really hard on trying to develop vehicles or incentive packages to entice people to come in Robinson. So I get the impact fees, it makes sense. Textbook definition got it. But then where's that offset going to be when we're already doing as much as we can from an incentive point to entice them versus scare them off?
Most of the places they're going to deal with that wherever they go. It's not, most areas impact fees are there.
That's what suits us even better, that we don't.
And again, we don't have to, just understand that all of your other customers are gonna foot the bill. So
Well,
that's the
and
other
I think
alternative.
that's where you get into, you know, at some point, yes, but then another thing is, where our major development is for commercial, we don't need impact over there, correct? We've got the water sources there.
No, we don't have the water, that's the problem we're running into.
I mean, with the 12-inch line on the width.
Yeah, we have the
We've got-
line there,
we've
but we
got-
can't get any more water from Waco. Waco is not going to.
Depending
sell.
on the user that would come in. Yeah.
I mean, we have 500,000 gallons a day, and we're using most of that now. So that's what I'm saying, we don't have the water over there. That's part of what has become an issue, because when we started talking with Waco about getting more water, they started going, well, we'll get with you, and then finally they just said, we don't have it.
But we can pull from the river.
That's our ultimate
We
goal,
need more
right? Is
capacity.
having a
We need
different,
more capacity in the
with the
plant, we have to
reservoir.
build more reservoirs.
so that, wouldn't that be like your selling point to, new businesses? Like, hey, in the future, we hope to be self-sustainable and not have to depend on Waco's
But-
water, because we're
But
building these.
the first reservoir we're getting ready to build is $21 million.
So yeah, impact fees.
So that's what I'm saying. It's one of those, we're gonna have to come up with the money side. And again, we don't have to make a decision tonight. It's just going forward, there is, and again, we are working on some other options to possibly contract water, some other things. It's not really an agenda tonight, so I don't wanna go off too far into it, but we're looking at other options to access water that we don't have to have reservoirs for. But we don't wanna give that up either, because we have that, and if we don't eventually start doing something with it, we may lose it. So it's just the immediacy of we need some more water right now, but we also need to be thinking long-term of the reservoirs. So again, there's a lot of costs, and you know, our bills are high. The rest of Texas is going to catch up to us. It's a matter of time. There's too many people around the state have their heads stuck in the sand thinking that, well, you know, water's forever. Yeah, we pull it out of the ground all we want, and the state has taken the stand that they're not going to allow new big reservoirs, you know, big lakes to be built anymore, because it takes too much land, doing it in domain, and so there's going to be a lot of folks struggling going forward. And those places that are thinking ahead now are going to be in a really good position. You always hear these stories about different places around the state where suddenly they don't have water, and they're panicking to run a pipeline 40 miles somewhere to get water, and they're rushing because their lake's getting lower and lower and lower.
We're doomsday prepping for water.
Yeah, I mean, water's essential to life, and yet we kind of act like it's just, there's plenty of it, we don't have to worry about it. And the aquifer's dropping, it doesn't really recharge. We're starting to have discussions about whether or not we can inject water into it, treat it and inject it. But we don't know if this aquifer will let us do that, so it's gonna take pilot studies. But a lot of things people have not talked about. And Greg's been here a long time. He knows the water situation here better than I do. The Metroplex, Parks and Metroplex, they're way ahead of us. Tarrant County has Tarrant Regional Water District. They have 3 huge reservoirs they built east of Dallas, and they pump water. They have 96-inch pipelines. They pump water from East Texas to Tarrant County. But you know, they were planning another reservoir to go even further out, and the state said, nope, no more. So now they're like, well, we're good to here, and now we're starting to wonder about where do we go. And they've got, you know, thousands of people a day moving into the Metroplex, and we keep attracting people and businesses, and nobody's really talking about where's the water going to come from. So there's a bigger picture than that, but we're just, right now, we're talking about the next 10 years, what we need to do with a plant upgrade and wastewater things we need in place and things like that. So I guess the question is, are you comfortable with us pursuing, and I'm sure there's some more tweaking we can do on the tiers and stuff. Are you comfortable with the 4 tiers for residential? Are you comfortable with the various base rates for commercial based on the meter size?
So I'd say I'm good with the concept, and I get why we need to do it. I think it would benefit us in the long run. We've got to get out of the residential areas subsidizing the commercial side. Can we get a copy of this presentation just so we can
Sure,
look
can you,
at it?
can you send that presentation to me?
I have it.
Oh, you have it? Okay, yeah, we'll email that.
And then the only other thing is, Greg, back in the day, Bert and I were part of this council when we did a rate study, right? And we lived through a real quick increase in water rates, pretty quick. There was analysis behind that, why we did it, but I guess the demand, or whatever the assumptions we made at that time, we were basically exceeding or outpacing what we had thought was going to happen. So I just want to make sure that whatever we do here, which I think it's good we're talking about it now, vetting it through so that way when we do come up to budget analysis or budget planning for next year, we're well equipped with information and can make
Sure.
those decisions. But then I kind of want to know, we didn't do a really good job, or maybe I didn't see it, of ensuring that those continued rate changes or whatnot were or weren't necessary. So just kind of a contingent plan on how we ensure what we're setting in place is staying competitive on the commercial side, but also not, breaking our citizens' pockets.
Well, and part of the reason, so the last rate study, it was like 7, 8, 9% for however many years in a row. We did tap the brakes on that at a point because we kept, that was money to issue debt. We were getting the money in, the city was issuing the debt, we were sitting on a huge amount of money. So, we're just now getting to the point where we need, whether we kept that or we do something different, it's time to update or look further out because we're kind of getting to the end of that. The reason I wanted to do this is because the way our current rates are, they're really not equitable. We have low volume users subsidizing high volume users, and we have residents subsidizing commercial. And so going forward, we need to come with a rate structure that's more equitable, where everybody's paying for what they're using for, not some people are overpaying so that other people can underpay. So, it's right now, and even with what he showed, we're for the most part covering costs, but when you factor in this debt we have to issue over the next, 3 or 4 years that he has factored in, that's what's pushing this next round up, because we're there. We've been able to operate with all that money we had. We also, the old debts, the increase, we're still making money, revenue above expenses, so we were doing projects without having to borrow the money. So like we did all of Fan Estates and all that. So it's not that the rates necessarily, we just didn't keep up. It's kind of, we're here. It's time. And if we're gonna have to look at another increase, adopting another increase, then let's do it equitably. We talked to the company that did the last one, and I asked the question, especially on the sewer, why didn't we change it? And the response was, well, that's how the city was doing it. And anytime you make a change, you have winners and losers, but we already had winners and losers. And maybe if we could make everybody just be fair and not have winners and losers, it might be a better approach. So it's not a case of, oh my gosh, we're in trouble, we've got to raise a raise. It's we're reaching the point where it's time to start raising again. How can we do that equitably? How do we do that fairly? How can we minimize the impact? But also, how can those low-end users have been kind of carrying the higher users for quite a while now. It's just time to, especially as we go forward and we grow, we need to be fair. So
No, I think it's the right.
So we can show you all that, but it's not a case of all of a sudden we're kind of in trouble. It's just we know we've got all these new capital projects. Because we've pretty much exhausted most of the original CIP that those rates were tied to. I mean, there's just a handful of things we haven't done in there. Some of it's because priorities changed and we don't necessarily need to do them. So yeah, it's not a case of there was anything wrong with the revenue projection of the last study. It's just we've kind of reached the end of that period.
No, I know I'm just one fifth of the voice up here, but I'm comfortable with it. I think that's the right path. So I'd like to continue to pursue that.
Yeah, I mean, tonight's a lot of big numbers, and we want to try to make it as palatable as possible. But we also know we can't go forward not doing something.
I agree that the rates that we have set now are not providing the revenue stream we really need. And if you're going to make it equitable and fair, it's gonna be a have to pay by usage pattern. It's gonna hurt some people, probably more than it's gonna help, but it has to be done. You can't provide on a wish and a whim, you have to provide on accurate numbers.
I was just thinking how we put that information into like layman's terms where everybody understands like how it's, I mean, everybody gripes about bills going up and whatnot, but like how they understand like why and where we could be in 10 years, like, you know, how do you spread the importance of water conservation and why?
Well, I think there's maybe also an assumption that the water treatment plant is also our sewer plant.
Mm.
So, okay, now, some of them may not be educated that our wastewater is actually going to Waco.
Yeah. Being transferred to.
And then, we can always, I guess, blame Waco.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
yeah, well, it is a regional plant, we used to all own it. And a few years ago, we all decided to let one city run it, and the city made sense with Waco, because there were all kinds of obstacles into running it, because we all had to share the debt, so whenever they needed to upgrade something, we all had to go out and issue bonds,
Mhm.
kick in our share. And we couldn't apply for grants because some of the cities didn't qualify for grants and others did. And now because Waco has it, Waco can qualify for a lot of
All
those
the
grants.
things.
The rest of us, because of household incomes and things, may not qualify for. So it just made sense. If there was a violation, all 7 cities received the violation, not one city. And so it just was, there was a lot of complications in running the plant jointly like that, so. But we have a pretty solid contract there, but it is tied to their costs, and sewer costs are going up. There's this mindset that sewer should be cheaper than water, and it's just the opposite. It costs a whole lot more to treat sewer, it costs a whole lot more to install gravity sewer lines, and so the costs related to sewer are much higher than water, but yet the perception is, well, sewer is just sewer, it should be cheaper. And that's really not the case. You can put water line in the ground all day long, you don't have to worry about it, but sewer lines, the fall's gotta be just right. If it's too steep, it could be negative, the size of the pipe, and then the treatment is way more complex process than water treatment. You not only gotta have all the
We have-
chemicals and
We
filters,
have
you
a
gotta have bugs.
communications team, sorry.
Go ahead.
We have a communications team that can help communicate some of these changes and why costs are going up and why the bill's changing. For example, we have like a dollar infograph that shows where your dollar goes for growth, reservoirs, and it really tells a story, and when you hear a story, then people accept it more than just rates going up.
Yeah, I agree.
And we included that with this study, we
Yep.
included a component in this study for them to help us with that
Yeah.
kind of information. So,
Because McDonald's almost set everybody over the edge, so we,
yeah, the one that nobody's gonna go to, and it's been packed since it opened.
It's like they've never eaten at McDonald's.
Yeah.
All right, well, we will continue to move ahead, and we will, Destiny will send that presentation out first thing in the morning.
Yeah, I just emailed it to you, but I can send it to everybody.
Oh, he can hit the forward
I'll
button.
send it to everybody
Yeah, he
tonight
can hit the
before I
forward
leave.
button, yeah.
I'll stay
Greg,
here and
Destiny,
make.
I've added a few slides, or a few graphics for that AWWA than what I sent you, so I'll send you a new copy right after.
Okay. Okay, if you do that, I'll send that one out.
Okay.
Thank you, Justin.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much. Any questions, feel free to call or email me. My number's on the presentation if you have any questions.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Good night.
And those of you new to the council or old to council, if you want to take a tour of the water plant and everything to see how things work, I'm always willing to set that up if you're
Yeah,
just
because we have.
make an
because I
appointment.
want to.
I do too.
Mr. George is like, I know it like the back of my hand.
Preferably during the day if possible, right?
Yeah.
Plant's all shiny right now because TCQ just did all their inspections this week.
Is that right?
Everything's all shiny and
Oh,
sparkly.
okay, yeah, that's when we wanna go then, yeah.
I have a question. Greg, how is the plant status right now moving forward? What do you need to have done?
Well, there's 21 million he mentioned for the reservoir. That's the reservoir alone. Just get more impounded water. That itself is gonna have to be increased capacity to treat additional water than what we need.
How about the membranes? Are they good for now?
They're good for now.
Yeah. Well, we changed those, what, 3 or 4 years ago?
7 or 8 years,
Was
we
it
get
that
out
long?
of it, it's time to change them again.
Yeah, okay,
So far, the numbers still looking good, so they're running pretty good right now.
all right.
One of the things we're looking at doing, because right now, if you remember Walker Partners, y'all approved a preliminary study for them to do for the reservoirs of the plant and all that stuff. So one of the things we're looking at trying to do is change our permit right now requires everything has to go through the membranes. But there are times when the water in the river, the solids and things are at a level we could treat it conventionally. And if we could do that, it would help us treat more water at more efficient costs, so. But that's gonna require a new permit and things like that. So right now, Walker Partners is doing some studies and things, trying to determine what level we can try to do that. And then that's gonna kinda tie back to potential additional water sources that we have. So right now, there's a whole lot of stuff in flux, and that's why I couldn't really give Justin really wanted a nice CIP, and I didn't have one all dressed up. So I just gave him estimates of where we were based on where we are. Because we're gonna have to upgrade the plant probably before we have a reservoir built. That fortunately isn't gonna be quite as expensive, but we're also talking with other cities about, can we treat for them? We're talking to Waco. Waco has a lot of Brazos water, and we've talked to them about, you're not using it right now, would you lease it to us for a period of time until we can build future reservoirs? Or would you work out a deal where we treat all of it for you, and then our share of the cost is we keep a percentage of it and send you part of it? So we're trying to have those kind of conversations and get outside the box and look at, we even had some discussions about reuse water. The effluent that's leaving the wastewater plant, it's going in the river, and would it make sense to put it in the river, pump it up the river from us, and then allow us to pull more water out of the river based on what they're putting back in the river, so.
Do we have the land for the reservoirs yet, or is that something that's
We
gonna
have the
be
land for the next one,
for the next one?
and we have a little bit of land for the third or fourth one.
How big of a reservoir are we talking?
What's the next one? How big's the,
The one we got now is 90 acres, and it's probably over 100, I would say, 100 acres.
I think our total capacity that we wanna have for all the reservoirs, all 4 phases. You know what that is? Cause I know the 2 we have now seem to be the smallest ones of all of them
Right.
in the original plan.
Yeah, I can't remember, so many acre feet, but I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think our permit's like 13,000 acre feet,
Overall,
but
yeah.
we get like 8,800 of that. So all the water we pull out, a percentage of it has to go back in the river with the stuff we filter out of it. So we don't get all of it, and then some of it evaporates too, so. But, one of our biggest challenges right now too is, one of our reservoirs has a liner, and that's creating problems for us. Both in ability to treat and hogs and coyotes ripping it up, so.
And then also, it's split down below the water level, and the water that's got underneath the material, and we got some undermining going on one end. So
Yeah.
that's probably at an inspection on the dam the day before we had the system inspection, that's probably gonna be in the response, so, to do something about that dam.
Yeah.
But that's on our to-do list anyway, that structure needs to be relined with a different structure in there. Again, that's not factored in the cost of the original tonight either, so. That liner was put down and was not, it should have had some type of protection put over the top of it where wildlife and nature couldn't interfere with its life. It just hadn't held up. Ongoing maintenance issue.
He's got video of coyotes playing tug of war with it from game cameras.
To go out and we patch the hose is you ever patch the tube for the bicycle tire of your kid, that little glue you put on there, that's the same smell this glue puts that we put this patch on. I guess that smell attracts them. They just, as soon as we patch it that night, they come tear up the patch.
I don't know, it sounds like a good Friday night. Shooting at them. I wanna eat the liner.
Anything else?
Oh, I hate our water discussions, it gives me anxiety. It does.
If there's nothing else, we'll adjourn at 7:06.
Well, I was gonna go home and take a bath.
This
but I
conference is
showered
no
instead.
longer being
I showered.